The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
Well, hello. Welcome to Spindle City Straight Talk. I'm Chip.
And I'm CJ.
And it's Friday in the Riv, and I'd like to take a point of personal privilege at the beginning of the show to
Knock yourself out.
remind everyone to remember the sacrifice made by Lieutenant Menard in Worcester. Gave his life attempting to rescue or search for people who were supposed to be in the building. It's a sad fact of life that firefighters and police officers and corrections officers and military people can lose their lives when they try to do they're doing everything right. He was searching for victims, potential victims, and he was trapped, and he died in a line of duty. It's something that's unfortunately unavoidable, contrary to what some people say, that we've got to eliminate it. It's impossibility. That's one of the things that separates those three professions. That's the reason they were put in group 4, because they can't wait outside until the situation abates itself. If there's a prison riot, corrections officers have to go in and put their life on a line. And if they do everything right, they can die. Police officers can die at a routine traffic stop or a school shooting or many other instances. And firefighters go into a building to protect lives and property, and unfortunately, they can be killed when they do everything right. And people will say that's the nature of the job, and it is. But we must always remember that everyone in these professions chooses to have an occupation where they know that every day when they walk out of the house, they may not come home. So I hope you all give a thought to the sacrifice Lieutenant Menard made and all the sacrifices that all the men and women who have died for our country and in the public safety sectors have given on a daily basis. And that's what separates them. They're fatalities in all professions. But these professions are unique because it's an inherent part of the job, that even if you go there and do everything right and there are no mistakes, you are battling the unknown all the time, and you can not come home. So
Worcester's really taken a hit for the past 10 years.
Yeah, well,
with
you know,
the loss of firefighters.
and that's one of the things, and I know they're not going to like me, but that's the difference between a professional department. They go in the buildings. You're not going to lose a lot of lives if you stand outside and water the shingles.
Right.
But if you go in a building and attempt to rescue people and attempt to do your job at a major fire, or any fire, all fires are major. There's smoke, because people don't realize 75% of the people who die in fires die from smoke inhalation, not from the fire itself. So the smoke is there. So the reality is that if you go in the buildings and do your job, and obviously the first priority in a fire service is life, then property. So they're in there searching, from what I've seen, and I don't have all of it, but I got what I got on the news, that they were searching for a child and another victim. There were 2 people supposedly still in the building when the fire was at its height, and Lieutenant Menard, I believe, was assigned to a ladder company, and part of ladder company's duties is to ventilate and also effect rescue with any rescue units that they have too. But he was doing his job. He did it, and he saved a brother firefighter, or 2 brother firefighters. He threw a probationary firefighter out the window.
Yep.
And he sustained 38 broken bones, but he's living. And unfortunately, Lieutenant Menard lost his life, and it's a tragedy. I'm speaking from a very personal perspective, obviously, because I buried 5 line of duty deaths when I was on a job. So I've marched in far too many processions everywhere in the state of Massachusetts and other states for line of duty deaths. We always sent a delegation from the union to all line of duty deaths. As a matter of fact, in I believe it was '99 when they lost 6 firefighters, we brought 3 busloads of Fall River firefighters up to Worcester to participate in the funerals of the Worcester firefighters. It's a sad commentary. It happens, but we should always remember the sacrifice made. And it's unavoidable with these jobs, and that's why you have to have so much respect for people who go into places where everybody else is running out. And that's what I just had to get that in.
I'm glad you mentioned it. I figured you would, because I was definitely going to bring it up.
Yeah.
And I think the last person he got out of the fire was that probationary firefighter, and then he lost his life. So had he not done this, we would have probably lost 4 or 5 people instead of 1. And even 1 is too many.
Yeah. And that's the sad part about it, that, you never know when there's a building going to collapse. I mean, in New York, they lost multiple firefighters one time because they were on a roof, and it was a large building, and they were doing their job of ventilating a roof. But they were unaware that they had been doing renovations in that roof, and some of the structural integrity of the building had been removed during the renovations, and the roof collapsed prematurely, and they lost a dozen firefighters. And of course, the Hotel Verdome in Boston, they lost 12. I mean, the list is endless, but it just goes to show that they don't have the luxury of staying out on the perimeter.
That's right.
Everybody else is watching and setting up perimeters and setting up, those professions, those 3 unique professions, have to go into a situation where no matter how you execute all your duties to the absolute maximum, and you can still, unfortunately, be killed in a line of duty. It's a sad commentary, and we should always remember it and give it the respect that it's due, because sometimes people do not respect what firefighters do. And I witnessed that firsthand, and I will tell you the story now, just because I get a chance to tell it now. I was at the fire, the first line of duty death that I experienced. I only had about maybe a year on a job, a little over a year. It was when Frank Candeas, that the Candeas Fire Station is named after, died attempting to rescue a victim at 555 Middle Street. Lieutenant Frank Candeas died. 5 firefighters went to the hospital with smoke inhalation. 1, a lieutenant that worked with me for many years, Zip DuPont, carried Frank's, well, he didn't know he was dead then, but they carried him down the ladder out of the window. He had collapsed about 10 feet from the window. He ran out of air. And we had no warning bells, by the way, because the city was too cheap to put warning bells on the air packs. And the only reason they did, and I think I've told this story before, that somebody on the North Shore died about a month later with no warning bells, and then the state mandated that the cities buy warning bells for the tanks. We had 15-minute air tanks with no warning bells. So Frank was in the building attempting to rescue a trapped occupant, and he died during that attempt. And I wasn't at that fire, but a good friend of mine was at the fire. He was on the back of engine 4. He got on the same day I did. And we relieved them the next day at the fire, at the scene. And, there were 5 in the hospital, and we relieved them to the scene, and we went into the building and continued with the operation, and we found the body of the victim who Frank was searching for. That body was in a bathtub with the ceiling on it. You couldn't find him because he was in the bathroom, and he was in a bathtub, and the ceiling had collapsed, and it was covering the individual. Of course, he only had 15 minutes of air, too, so we don't know how close he got, but he didn't find the victim. But he died attempting to rescue this individual. And as we were carrying the victim's body out, covered with a Stokes, there were a couple of, and I can't really describe them in the manner I want to describe them. But let's say they were, I'll try to describe it as delicately as I can. They were probably the bottom of the pond scum of the earth, sitting there watching us carry a victim out who a firefighter had died attempting to rescue, and 5 other firefighters had gone to the hospital. And I will never forget that comment as long as I live, because it's singed, it's burned into my memory. They looked at us carrying that victim out, and you know what the comment was? Look at that. They made sure they got their firemen out, didn't they? That's what they thought. That's what they thought. And I've never forgotten that. And that just goes to show how insensitive and many other expletives I can't say in front of a television camera. But I was brought up that you never hit a woman. But I'll tell you, there were 2 women sitting on that porch that day that I would have liked to hit with a left hook and do even more, because, you know, we lost a man, a hero who attempted to rescue this guy, and 5 other people almost died. They were in a hospital with severe smoke inhalation. And that's what pisses me off about the general public sometimes. You're all, you know, just like police officers. They can vilify police officers, dump garbage on them, throw stuff at them until they need them. And then they're the greatest guys in the world. It's the same thing with people like that. If those 2 bozos were hanging out a window with flames licking their butts, they would have been yelling for us, and we would have been the greatest guys in the world. So that's what disturbs me. Give credit where credit is due. These men work, and men and women work jobs that a lot of people can't do, won't do, and would never do. And with that, I'm finished on that one. So,
Takes a special person to be a firefighter.
no,
There's no question about it.
But so let's get into a more lighter subject: the circus that is Fall River. Let's see. Big headline: Cathy Ann Viveiros out as city administrator. Nice picture. Well, I guess my only comment to that one is better late than never.
Well, you're not going to like who's taking her place.
Temporarily.
In term, yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't like it either. You know, I'm obviously going to. But you know, the thing that gets me is, I think it's really good that she got booted, even though it's only kind of saber rattling. It's only it's more of, see what we're doing. She's got a month and a half left on a contract. So, but I'm glad she ended it with an exclamation point, because she went in front of the city council and couldn't provide figures, which, by the way, she's the city administrator. She's supposed to have figures. And what's her famous line, CJ?
I'll get it back to you.
Get back to you. Now, the city was told that we could renovate those parking garages and get state money. Our legislative delegation called and said, hey, maybe we can help you fix these things, and the taxpayers in Fall River won't have to foot, you know, as much of a bill. Hey, great. It's kind of like the CSO project when we could get federal money, right? and a federal bureaucrat didn't get the paperwork in on that. So what is our city administrator, who's getting 6 figures, and her last couple of months she's been running a campaign, what does she do? I can't give you exact numbers. Well, why not? As soon as you got that word, you couldn't have called a couple of companies, put out an RFP, get a couple of ballpark figures, and provide something with our delegation to work with to try to relieve the taxpayers' burden? Thank you, Cathy, for amplifying your incompetence, because you showed that you still and will always be a mall manager, not a city administrator. And I don't care if you worked with the Flanagan, Sutter, and Carrere administration, because shame on Flanagan, Sutter, and Carrere for allowing you, through their entire term, to go in front of the city council and not answer the questions, because that's your job. When Bob Connors went in front of the city council, and Jim Smith did, they had all the numbers that they were there for, because they knew what they were going to be asked, and they had the numbers. But I have virtually never seen you give an accurate number or a number in your career. So, good riddance as far as I'm concerned, but that's my personal opinion. You Cathy Ann lovers can vilify me, because I don't care.
Well, it was interesting because there was a whole lot of rumors going around on how she left. What happened was, according to reports, she was approached and she was told, we will either relieve you of your duties or you can resign. She selected to step down and resign and leave, and that was all effective yesterday. She didn't even finish the week. It was effective yesterday. And they bought out her contract. So she's not losing any money. But it was quite possible that she was going to be replaced in January anyhow. Now, according to Paul Coogan, I heard today in the news, he's going to form a committee to potentially look for a new city administrator. I think he should not only form a committee for that, but also form a committee for the chief financial officer, who is now the acting city administrator.
Which, by the way, is another tier that we never had before.
Right.
Why do we need a chief financial officer? We got a treasurer and an auditor, don't we? Why do we need a chief financial officer except to give Mary Sahadi her 5 years so she can bump up her pension?
Which she has.
Which she has.
Right.
So, and that's the reason she took the job, because she's been on the Housing Authority board. So she's going to use that time, and now she's going to get her 5 full years at full time, and she'll get a pension that far exceeds the pension she would have got as a board member of the Housing Authority.
Right.
So, you know, this is all political BS, and they complain about the retirement system. They're the worst abusers. And we don't need a CFO.
You're a burden. You're a burden.
We don't need liability.
That's right. You're a liability. That's what it was. You're a liability.
That's what we are. All the retirees, and now they will become liabilities. But the reality is, we do not need a CFO in the city of Fall River. Geez, how many people do we need to do basic addition and subtraction?
Which they can't do.
Which they can't do. That's exactly right, which they can't do. We got an auditor that audits the city every year, supposedly, and that same auditor is the CFO. So, and they've been doing it for 30 years and making mistakes for 30 years. We got an auditor, an outside auditor, supposedly, that audits the city and its finances. We've got department heads that are responsible for every single dollar that's reflected in the budget, because everybody in a budget has all their expenses in the budget. They submit it. That's why the budget's this thick. It's not like this. It's that thick. So we need a CFO to oversee all this stuff. And we got an auditor auditing it. We had to hire now a CFO. That's because Cathy couldn't do her job as city administrator. So again, government rearing its ugly head on how it handles issues. When you can't do the job, give somebody else a 6-figure job to help you and give them free assistance. So now we got a CFO, we got a treasurer, We got an auditor. The school department's got a treasurer. The school department's got an auditor. We got more auditors and treasurers, and nobody can figure out where any of our money is, and everybody yells that we need a full forensic audit. This is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. CFO. That's a new position. It was created, what, 2 years ago? 3 years ago? Unbelievable. And, you know, and then against Cathy Ann Viveiros is another article out by Amanda Burke. I don't know that name. Is that a new reporter?
She's a relatively new reporter.
And Joe Good?
Yep.
Viveiros began a write-in campaign for mayor shortly after Jaisal Correa, her boss, was heard on a leaked recording telling supporters that he could not beat challenger Paul Coogan one-on-one and planned to introduce multiple write-in candidates to split the vote. Viveiros denied coordinating with Correa, her run for office for election. She got 1,756 votes, which were all his votes. No, yeah, she denied it. And how can you tell that wasn't accurate? Her lips were moving when she said that. Because you think it's a coincidence that she got 1,756 votes?
No, you've got the totals there. She got 1,614 votes.
Well, no, that's the new one. That's the old one. I'm reading from a Herald News article.
Well,
we can correct it later.
This is what's going to be certified at 5 o'clock.
So now, all right, she got even less, but okay. And Jaisal got
1,010.
Oh yeah, so he upticked because according to this he had, well, in the old figures he had 1,002.
Right.
So he went up 8 votes. So Erica Scott was in there, but this, so, well, you know, it's all BS, but all she got was what Jaisal lost. So it wasn't coordinated. And also, she had all her signs made, all the stickers made, and every one of her signs, virtually 95% of her signs, I can't say all because that's too, but 95% of her signs went right over the place where a Jaisal sign was. But there was no coordination. And the same people that stood behind a podium when Jaisal suspended his campaign was standing behind Cathy Ann when she announced her candidacy. But she expects, like I said, look, they've far exceeded urinating on people's head and trying to convince them it's raining. They're defecating on your head. That they've gone beyond it. I mean, how dumb does she think the people are in this city? But I guess the people told her because she got virtually no votes. I mean, if you take her family, immediate family, and her boyfriend out of her total, every other vote she got was just a Jaisal vote because she siphoned away from Jaisal. And with those 2 new totals, let's do the new total. Jaisal got 2,777 in the primary. Am I correct with that number?
Yeah, that's about it.
Okay. And these are still not, these still unofficial, but supposedly these are the numbers that are coming out tonight.
At 5 o'clock.
At 5 o'clock. So if they're wrong, well, I'm qualifying this. These are not officially certified. However, they're officially unofficial.
Right, because what they're waiting for right now is anyone requesting a recount or a challenge to the ballot. That's all they're waiting on. These numbers have been counted.
Well, what a surprise if that happened. So, okay, let's see. Now, so Jaisal got 1010. That's almost as easy as 2777.
Exactly.
1010. And she got 1614. So now we've got 1624. Right?
Yep.
26,
24,
which is below his 2777.
Right.
So, again, I guess those went to Erica Scott, who actually got 74 votes. That's a lot for a write-in.
And she wasn't even running.
And she made, you know, she had been knocked out in the primary.
Right.
So I guess some people, Cliff Ponte got 7. And William Flanagan, it fascinates me, got 10 write-ins. That must have been him and all his friends, because he continues to say what a great mayor he is. I guess he gets amnesia because he still can't remember the $8 million deficit he generated, the 22 windows, Dominion, and the 37 other things that were in Flanagan shenanigans. But hey, he got 10 votes, so Good. I'm looking at city council. Write in. Oh, no write-ins for city council.
No, they had to have at least five votes to be included in the count.
So I guess the votes for you, your 4 votes weren't counted.
No.
No. But I mean, again, a little bit of levity in Fall River. They expect you to believe that. It wasn't a coordinated effort. And she was, she's gone. And let's hope we get a real city administrator again, because we have had real city administrators. I think somebody called a radio station this morning and talked about Alan Silva, who was he's a great numbers guy. People don't like the kind of cuts he makes, but he's merciless.
As Linda put it, he cuts with a hatchet.
Yeah, well, I prefer a chainsaw. He's worse than a hatchet. I've seen some of his cuts. I mean, he goes after it with a chainsaw, but his numbers are always accurate. Unlike our, former now, because I believe her resignation was effective immediately.
It was effective yesterday, yes.
Our former city administrator, Alan's numbers, you could take those to the bank. You could take them to the IRS. You could take them anywhere you wanted. They would stand up under the scrutiny of anybody, as were Bob Connors and Jim Smith. They were being paid to be actual city administrators. That's why we didn't need a CFO.
You mean they were paid to do a job?
That's why we didn't need a chief of staff.
They were paid to do a job, and they did it.
They did it.
Amazing.
Well, again, we know that. So let's move on to Star. Neighbors plan to appeal the Star treatment. Good luck.
Well, interestingly enough, the building inspector, Hathaway, never answered their request for an appeal on that decision, and that's what delayed it for so long. Mm-hmm. And Tony Dice, obviously, I know Tony, he probably wasn't very happy. They had to send him a certified letter on October 23rd for him to actually finally act. It's really a shame that you got to spend more money to get your government officials to act and do their job.
Well, but you remember, though, it's Star's about making money, and that's what it's all about. It's always about money. Follow the money, And speaking of money, idling your car in Massachusetts for too long this winter could land you a $500 fine. And this is the law they're quoting. Chapter 90, Section 16A, quote, "No person shall cause, suffer, or allow, or permit the unnecessary operation of an engine of a motor vehicle while said vehicle is stopped for a foreseeable period of time in excess of 5 minutes." So the state's going to tell you you can get up to a $500 fine. So instead, freeze your butt off, get pneumonia, and send them your hospital bill.
No, but there is an exception to the rule, and that's for defrosting your windows.
And who is there, and who is going to determine whether you were defrosting your windows?
I guess we're going to hire another batch of police officers just to check window defrosting.
Go. Because now we got another court case. My windows were defrosted. No, they weren't. So let's go to court and litigate that too. But look, again, Massachusetts figures out a way to make you pay for everything. And while we're on it, let's go federal. Deval Patrick running. Another one, Weld, running. All the Massachusetts retreads in the races. And, Mitt Romney, who is I live anywhere that I can get in an office, because he lived in Utah, he lived in Massachusetts.
He still lives in Utah. He's representing Utah in the Senate.
Now. Yeah, he's in Congress now. But the fact is that, our illustrious, and the thing that really got me, when they talked about Deval Patrick, they actually called him a moderate. A moderate.
They obviously weren't paying attention to him when he was in Massachusetts.
Yeah, they were. And the irony of it, it shows how disingenuous politicians are. He was a ultra liberal when he was our governor. Loved to spend the taxpayers' money. But who did he work for when he got out? He worked for a major freaking corporation in finances.
Was it Bain Capital?
Bain Capital.
Was it Bain
Capital? Yeah. He worked for a company that's so conservative that just goes to show that they have no they have no integrity. They just go wherever them, like, as we said on our first show 7 years ago, follow the money, and that's what politicians do. They follow that trail of dollar bill crumbs.
That's it. Hey, people, have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday, and remember, stay angry.
And remember, the votes will be official tonight
at 5 o'clock.